Hello, and welcome to another episode of History Hunters. In today's episode, we will delve into the details of prisoner of war in Germany during World War II. World War II, which took place from 1939 to 1945, was a brutal war between the Axis forces and the Allied forces. If captured, enemies were incarcerated and taken in as prisoners of war.
In wartime Germany, prisoners of war had been subjected to maltreatment by German officers, spent their free time engaging in activities to entertain themselves, and suffered long-lasting trauma due to their inhumane experiences.
To begin, prisoners of war suffered mistreatment from the Germans, and as a result, it led to many deaths. Food was scarce for civilians and troops during the war, and even more so for the prisoners of war. At the beginning of the war, every 2 prisoners shared one food ration. A German ration consisted of a combination of carbs and protein. Food such as honey, bread, potatoes, sausage, mincemeat, and cheese contained these nutrients. As the war dragged on, the prisoners' rations were cut to 1 for every 6 prisoners. This meager amount of food could not sustain their bodies, and as a result, they became extremely weak.
In the camps, prisoners had limited options pertaining to the types of clothing they had. The few items which they did receive often did not fit. Army pattern clothing became available for the prisoners due to efforts of the Red Cross, but the Germans took some of the clothing for themselves. The Red Cross also brought boots, shirts, wool underclothing, and gray coats from the British Army, and they supplied additional items such as scarves, gloves, woolen hats, and undergarments. Due to the harsh conditions which the prisoners faced, preservation of such items was essential.
Some prisoners of war suffered discrimination due to their religion, sexuality, political status, and race. Germans often killed Jewish soldiers along with communists. The Germans made special sections in the camps which held Russians, who they thought to be inferior. And due to this belief, the Germans starved and treated them harshly. Even in war, there were certain rules, such as those put forth by the Geneva Convention, which protected people who were not taking part in the war. These included prisoners of war. However, German camps broke these rules, and many prisoners of war suffered unethical treatment.
Secondly, life as a prisoner of war was atrocious. First of all, they had to find ways to entertain themselves. Some prisoners chose to study in order to kill time. The prisoners could take courses that would prepare them to return to civilian life once the war was over. Some chose to act and make theatrical plays. Theater seats were even made from boxes. Women played an important role in the prison camps too. They participated in improvised tea dances so the men could think that they were still women in their lives.
Of course, there were many prisoners that attempted to escape. Even though most were not successful, they drained the Germans of their resources because of their numerous attempts. Prison breaks were coordinated by officers so that all their plans matched up and did not conflict with each other. Plans ranged from producing fake documents to disguising oneself in German uniforms. Some prisoners took part in the war again, but this time for the enemy. They were either bribed to participate or forced to. Also, some prisoners switched sides willingly. This occurred because their own country may have been unwelcoming to their beliefs. Yet, the country in which they would be held prisoner in might have been more lenient towards their beliefs. Some soldiers felt a sense of shame at being captured, or about 170,000 British soldiers were taken as prisoners of war by Germany. Many of them felt embarrassed to be forced to surrender. Others were traumatized, as their friends were killed in front of them before they were taken away as a prisoner.
Lastly, prisoners of war experienced severe conditions that affected them psychologically and physically, which often left them in a traumatized state and with long-lasting effects. Survivor's guilt is one prime example of a traumatized state, as it causes one to feel persistent mental and emotional stress due to the presumption that his existence should have met the same fate as that of those who died in their severe experiences. Survivors felt a sense of guilt for being captured before doing all their missions, thus being unable to fulfill their duty to their country. Although they believed that they could possibly have done more, their situations were beyond their control.
Many survivors suffer from combat stress reaction, otherwise known as CSR, and they had flashbacks when they heard or saw something that triggered those specific memories. Finally, on top of survivor's guilt and CSR, prisoners suffered from various types of injuries and diseases. These could range from everyday cuts and bruises to skin diseases and diarrhea. Medical treatment consisted of bandages for wounds, syringes to drain infections, and pills such as painkillers. However, these were not enough to treat the diseases, and as a result, many died from them. For example, typhoid, which infected many due to the unsanitary conditions in prison, resulted in many deaths and long-term defects such as hearing loss.
To conclude, prisoners of war held in German camps became victims of malignant treatment enforced by the camp officers, participated in various activities to pass their ample time, and sustained permanent mental and physical damage on account of their brutal experiences. They suffered all kinds of trauma ranging from starvation to diseases such as typhoid. The mistreatment of prisoners was unnecessary abuse of soldiers who were no longer taking part in the war. The Germans also used prisoners of war to their advantage by making them fight on their own, adding to German forces.
Their lives were insignificant to the Germans, and they were used as tools of war. The trauma did not stop only in the camps. Once they were free, they suffered from underlying medical conditions, which resulted from the inhumane treatment in the camps. As mentioned earlier, some suffered from CSR, causing them to have violent flashbacks, triggered by certain phrases or images. Although some may have made it out alive, no one left unscathed.
Thank you for watching today's episode of History Hunters. Be sure to stay tuned for future episodes, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments down below.